Hey, everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman, back for the 152nd Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. It's October 9th, 2023, and this is Indigenous Peoples Day. We're going to have some wonderful discussion about just that, about Indigenous rights and the holiday. I will point out, as a historian, that Columbus Day was actually established during the New Deal. And it, Columbus has become quite a villain, justifiably so, in our historiography. But the Columbus Day was originally set up basically to honor Italian Americans who were being badly mistreated. They were kind of the people of color at the time, and it was a very effective and important way of acknowledging Italian Americans, and now we are making the shift. Joe Biden, I believe, is the first president to officially acknowledge this as Indigenous Peoples Day. So we're going to spend much of the first hour talking with some great Indigenous activists and about the nature of the holiday. And in the second hour, we're going to go in to labor issues, and we may have Steve Donziger with us, the great activist lawyer, talk again about Indigenous issues in South America. So as always, we have a really full boat. We will have a report from Ohio as well on a uranium facility going on down there. Very, very important report from Pat Morita in Columbus. As usual, we are loaded to the gills. We're starting with 33 people. It's great to have everybody on with us. Kat Kramer, we were talking with you very briefly about your upcoming film festival. We did see San Onofre Syndrome last night, Milo and I, in downtown Los Angeles, and that film will be available online. We have Libby Halevi with us. Libby, can you tell us about putting San Onofre Syndrome coming available online for everybody? And then we're going to go to Andrea Miller to introduce our Indigenous section, and Andrea is part Cherokee. So go ahead, Libby, please.
Hi, Harvey, and thanks for inviting me on. The film San Onofre Syndrome is just about perfect when it comes to telling the story of San Onofre, both how the activists got it shut down and then the battle since that time dealing with the waste. And it won I believe the official title is the Grand Jury Award for Best Documentary for the Awareness Film Festival. That was announced last night. What is taking place as of this Sunday is a live stream of the film. I believe it will be good for 24 to 48 hours, but it will be starting this Sunday. And it's available. There are links up. I will send the link. I will post it in the chat for you to be able to go. But that is only the first time it's going to be available, because last night was the world premiere. What's going to be happening from this point forward is it's looking for places for screenings, for groups to take it on, and for any group that is involved in or close to a battle dealing with a nuclear site. This film includes not only the information about San Onofre, but it's virtually a primer as to how activists moved forward and how the steps that they took added up to initially the closure and then what followed after that. So I encourage you to do so. Harvey, I will set you up with the link. I'll post it in the chat for where people can actually purchase the tickets.
And Levy, to do justice, you are a great author. You were present. I wish you had been president. You were present at 3 Mile Island in 1979. I went in 1980, and you have a wonderful book out called. Well, what is your book called?
Yes, I Glow in the Dark. 1 mile from 3 Mile Island to Fukushima and nuclear hot seat, and it's a story how I went from no activism in nuclear other than being terrified in the 1950s, growing up under the shadow of the bomb, into 3 Mile Island, ignoring things, and then from there becoming an activist again after Fukushima. And the show, nuclearhotseat.com, is where the show is. I invite anybody to go there, sign up for it. It's free every week. There are more than 600 episodes. It's been going. It's in its 13th year now. And we've got Harvey on. We've had Mila Reason on. We've had just about everybody on at some point or another, and it's all searchable. So if there's any aspect of a nuclear issue that you want to know something about, go there, search it out. You'll find it. And if you want to know about a little bit more about San Onofre syndrome, SOS San Onofre syndrome, not this past week, but the week before was the episode where I interviewed the two filmmakers about what it took for them to make the film. And that's also, that website has got the information on how to access the live stream as well. But I will get that information specifically to Harvey so you can all have it on the chat.
And yeah, put it in the chat, please. Send it to Steve Caruso as well. That's great. Libby is a great treasurer, a great activist, and we're honored to have you with us. We're also honored, of course, to have Andrea Miller. Andrea has been a wellspring of the reason for these calls, actually, because of her spectacular work with grassroots and relational organizing. But she happened to mention in the last call that she is part Cherokee. And we also have Tatanka Bricka with us, who works with the Lakota, and he'll, in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day, he will present as well. And we have a couple other great guests from the Indigenous community to join us. So, Andrea, 5 or 10 minutes. We would love to hear your take. You know, you don't actually look Cherokee, but maybe you do.
These cheekbones.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I have studied the Cherokee are a truly admirable and important people with a tremendous history. And actually, of all the indigenous identified tribes or nations left in the United States, the Cherokee are by far the biggest. Generally listed at around 800,000 between Oklahoma and the Alleghenies. So we have 44 people with us to start. A very good turnout for an Indigenous Day, a holiday. Andrea, tell us all about being Cherokee.
I'm going to do a tiny bit of history, part of what makes Cherokee folks such interesting people. My mother's mother, so my maternal grandmother and her great-grandmother was Irish, but she married a Black Cherokee man. Now, when you look at the Cherokee people and the land where they were, which basically would be Tennessee and around North Carolina, some moved down to Arkansas, Georgia. The Cherokee, while they were tribal in nature and had their own culture, they couldn't help mingling with, trading with, spending some time with the white settlers that were coming to the region. And one of the most interesting things about the Cherokee people was, as they observed white culture around them, they began to pick up some of the white habits, some good ones and some not so good ones. So number of Cherokee, one of the bad habits was, most native tribes, you really don't hear about the impoverished and poor Indians. So there wasn't a wealthy side of the tribal nation and then the poor side. Everybody shared. It was a very cooperative society, which was one of the things that made, quote, the Indians very, very problematic. They thought the white people were crazy. My grandmother used to tell me the story of the test and I guess this has been passed down in her family for years, where they would meet, someone, and they would try to figure out, are they crazy or are they sane? Are they good people or are they those people? And they would say, Brave goes out and he kills 2 buffaloes, but he's very young and he only has a small family. He only will be able to eat 1 buffalo. What does he do with the other one? And for the people that were crazy, they would say, oh, he keeps both buffalo for himself. And they were like, well, that doesn't make any sense. You just share it with everybody. And that was their sanity test. Are we dealing with a sane, one of these newcomers, or is it one of the crazy ones who wants to waste food, not be neighborly, and help other people? And remember, the trading companies, the capitalists that arrived were very, very threatened by people who simply wanted to share everything and not become rich. So as some became more like the white settlers who were coming into their land and became rich, those Cherokee became slaveholders. And that is one of the reasons why we have Black Cherokee. But generally speaking, because of the tribal society where everyone had grown up, it wasn't, and again, this is according to my great-great-grandmother, it wasn't like being owned by a white plantation owner or the Cherokee. This was someone who helped with the work, so they didn't have to do the work. And it was a very different kind of relationship. And when they went on the Trail of Tears, some of the folks who had been slaves and technically had been and were not yet free chose to go with the Cherokee, and they identified as Black Cherokee. Anyway, that's the story that my grandmother told me, passed down from her mother.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, the Cherokee story is quite amazing. They were one of the so-called civilized tribes. And Thomas Jefferson challenged them to adopt the white man's ways. And they were a little too good at it. They set up a government. They had lumber mills. They had a state capital. They had a newspaper. They had a written constitution. And when Andrew Jackson tried to move them out in the late 1820s and early 1830s, they actually sued for statehood. And the Chief Justice, John Marshall, who, by the way, was Thomas Jefferson's cousin, said, well, you can't have statehood, but you do have sovereignty. In other words, you can't be a state. And the reason he used was that the Constitution says you can't carve a state out of existing states. And they were basically in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee, right? Where were you? Where did you grow up, Andrea?
Well, I grew up in Chicago, but my mother's ancestors, as it were, they were from Tennessee.
Oh, okay, yeah, Tennessee also. So John Marshall said, he said basically you can't be a state, but you can have casinos, because the decision turning down statehood granted them sovereignty, which the tribes then turned around to say, well, if we have sovereignty, we can have casinos, and they did, and that's why they exist. And so Jackson drove them out to Oklahoma, and about 13,000, about a quarter of them died. That was the Trail of Tears. but you know, they took over Oklahoma and had a whole civilization there and still do. So there you go. Andrea, it's really great to have you on with us. Very, very. Is there anything else you want to say about Indigenous Peoples Day?
No, I am very, very pleased that we now have a holiday where for so much of history, it was what could people do to make us disappear? And we always had the adage, well, yeah, but you know, Indians, the red men, they're not people, they're just, you know, something above the animals living here. And when you look at some of the dwellings of the Cherokee, the original dwellings, there was no glass, so they didn't have windows. But when you look at the original dwellings, it's like, you know, if that thing had windows, I'd live in it.
Right. Well, the Cherokee were phenomenally advanced, like the Iroquois. And you know, the guys they had them leave in part because gold was found in the hills, and even more valuable than the gold actually was the trees that were being, you know, the timber. And so Jackson, liar that he was, Andrew Jackson enlisted the Cherokee to fight for him against the southern tribes, the more southern tribes, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and promised them that he would, you know, care for them. And then he immediately broke his promise and treated them just like the tribes that he had defeated. He's a horrible man, Andrew Jackson. Terrible guy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Harvey and
Does
Andrea,
it remind you of anybody?
excuse me. I want to say hello to Andrea and Harvey, and welcome Anna Rondon, who's been here for a few minutes. And she is a project director with the New Mexico Social Justice and Equity Institute. And I'm getting some feedback.
Is she? I don't see her in the.
Well, she
is.
is.
Yes, there
Yeah.
she is.
Yeah.
I just unmuted her, I hope. We also have Pat Morita from Ohio. Pat, we are going to I looked at your fabulous slideshow. We are going to want to talk about the weapons complex in Southern Ohio. And Miley's going to bring us another guest. Ruth Strauss, did you want to ask a question real quick before we?
Yeah, I just a quick statement. I grew up in Alabama, and Andrea, you know, as racist as that place is, the Cherokee were lauded in our, you know, like 6th grade history books. You know, go figure. It was just kind of interesting. But the one thing I wanted to ask you is, I had this panic today that I needed to be phone banking with Center for Common Ground. And then I looked it up, and the election is in November 4th. Is there something that I need to do today, or can I procrastinate a little bit more?
Well, you can procrastinate a little bit more. I'm going to drop a link in the chat. And we have phone bank training every Tuesday. And I'll put that on Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And you can sign up on that link. We also have training on Wednesday from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. And that will go on until November.
Thank
Perfect,
you.
thanks.
And thank you for that. Randolph Shannon very astutely in the chat pointed out that when John Marshall's excuse for not giving the Cherokee statehood was that the Constitution says you can't create a state out of an existing state. But in the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, lawyer that he was, found a way to make West Virginia a state gouged out of Virginia. So, you know, somehow the law didn't apply. Although he did have the slight excuse that there was a civil war going on, but at any rate, that we should try again. I think the Cherokee should try again to get statehood. That would be great. Okay, so we're joined by the great Dennis Bernstein, host of Flashpoints. at KPFA. John Steiner is with us. And Pat Mariah, we're gonna get to you in a bit. Mila, why don't you introduce Anna Rondon, and let's hear her perspectives on Indigenous Peoples Day.
Anna, we're just so delighted that you can join us. We are connected to you through my dear colleague Damasio Lopez, who we're expecting at any moment now. But if you could just go ahead and introduce yourself. I was kind of hoping that you might have something to say about uranium mining and other projects that you're working with. Let me share the page here. Can you see? Can everybody see the your website?
And you are living, Anna, working on Dene, Zuni, and Acoma lands in New Mexico. And our listeners can't see it on radio land, but we're looking at some very beautiful desert landscape. Anna, do you want to introduce yourself and give us 10 minutes on Indigenous Peoples Day?
Yeah, greetings. Yate, everyone. This is kind of like impromptu, but I really appreciate these spaces, especially today and celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day that was born thousands of years ago, which is every day. All of us are Indigenous. I just learned that before people started popping over here from the other side, they were victimized as well by Christianity. And what you're talking about earlier is a great conversation on why all these so-called justices don't do justice is because of the doctrine of discovery. And that still plagues us today as a license to kill people that were natural with the world and with the universe. So in learning that, now I know why folks that came from over there are so fucked up, is because they were, Christianized for 2,000 years before us. So now
real quick, this is going to be a radio broadcast, so we're going to try to keep some of those. But I second those emotions. No, I second those emotions.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, I always tell my kids, don't say the F-bomb, but here I go. But anyway, so the doctrine of discovery, I know that the Pope repudiated, which means they stepped away from it, but they didn't denounce it. But for us, it opens the door for the legitimacy of all the over 500 years of Christianity in the Western Hemisphere and Africa, where it started, the doctrine of discovery in 1453. And so knowing that, we have to know the history, everyone's history. That way, no one can say, you're not going to, you can't be like us, so we're going to teach you through boarding school. And now we know what that has done in unearthing of our babies, of the bodies of our children that are still being discovered. So truth is really powerful, especially in the spiritual realm, where we've been fighting this battle of spiritual war beyond us. But that's why we're here, is to create beauty. We are creators. We can help others live in a better way of life. That's our purpose, and that's why we fight against the nuclear beast and the capitalism, the many monsters, the heads of many monsters that we all deal with on a daily basis. It's time that we are not victimized as Indigenous peoples. We thrive today. We thrive around the world. And we've never forgotten our holy people and the original teachings, where I can share that the white people, where they lived, they took care of the fire. And the Asiatic people are responsible for the air. And the African American people are responsible for the water. Indigenous peoples, as you know, are responsible for the earth. Those were the original teachings. That's why I say we're all indigenous. You cannot have that superiority complex of better than, less than. Hell no. No mofo way. You know what I'm saying? No
You
more.
got it. You
We're
got it.
equal. We're equal. There's no Olympics and having who was the most tortured, the most genocide. We all know the truth. Now is time to teaching our next generations and the ones now
Well, thank
of
you
the
for that.
beauty. So
Beautiful.
anyway, no nukes,
No
no
news.
nukie, as my kids used to say at the Laguna Indigenous Uranium Forum, they would say, no more nukie. But anyway, that's a different topic. But thank you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to have you with us. We really appreciate it. And the historian in me can't resist pointing out the practice of scalping, which was blamed on the indigenous by the white settlers here, actually was used by Oliver Cromwell in Ireland and Scotland when the Puritans took over England and conquered Ireland and Scotland. They scalped the local people, and the Dutch traders may have been the ones who introduced it to North America. It was not, scalping was not an indigenous practice. So I did want to point that out, please. Let's go to Tonka Bricka. Since we, yeah, and then we'll go to Pat Morita to tell us about the situation in Southern Ohio with the uranium there, because it's so relevant to the indigenous disasters in New Mexico. At Tatanka, you embody both the Italian and the indigenous aspects of this day. We have 61 people waiting to hear your wisdom. So you give us 5 or 10 minutes, it'd be great.
Yeah, I'll probably end up taking 10 because I want to talk a little about Leonard Peltier as well.
Oh, yes, Leonard Peltier.
Yeah, I have European heritage of Italian and Dutch and Scotch, and I have some Nez Perce through my grandfather, my mom's dad. I'll tell you about that in a bit. But I was in brief contact with Chase Iron Eyes on Pine Ridge earlier today, and did invite him to come on board if he could. A very busy day for him. They're doing their own ceremony. So he sends his greetings. I think he was on here, Harvey, about a couple of years ago. I invited him on.
He was. Thanks to you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, he's looking forward to getting back. So we will schedule that. There's a lot he has to say about what's happening, but he sends his blessings. And I would just like to, just for a moment, all of us take a breath and acknowledge that we all live on stolen land from wherever we're zooming in on Turtle Island. And that I'll say a few words just of invocation. Creator, this is Buffalo Waves in the Breeze, Tatanka, here with our circle, with our group, whatever we call ourselves now, working on these issues to heal with Mother Earth. And I want to acknowledge also the sky beings among us. Most of our tribes here on Turtle Island also have stories about coming here from different star systems. And as we know, these beings are among us. And so in addition to our consciousness allowing for, as Anna was speaking so eloquently earlier, we're all equal with everyone who is claiming their Earth origin. There are many of us that do claim a star origin as well. And so that's a topic for another time, but we're part of a larger neighborhood here. And so we ask for your wisdom in helping us make this transition, that we're not alone, and there are others among us, some of whom are willing to help us. And also to take responsibility for the U.S. taxes that has gone in to bring those ships down, to study the 70 plus 80, quote, we call them races of ETs, and to effectively reverse engineer at least some of the technology and militarize it, which actually could be free energy for the whole Earth. So that's for another day. We ask your guidance on that. And in addition to the 4 directions, I'll do very quickly in our ways with Sun Bear. We call in the powers of the North and the place of the air, the place of the animals, and the receiving energy, that incredible receiving power that animals give us. Welcome, powers of the North. We bring in and call in the powers of the South, the place of the plant world and the waters and our emotions, emotions, energy and motion. And we're here to script a new narrative of what human family can do here. So we call on the sacred plants and the sacred waters to help us with that. Welcome. We call on the powers of the West, the place of Mother Earth, Idaho, sun come down the mountain, the place where holding and transforming energy happens, the place of death and change, and all the healing that we need to do with the mineral world. Keep it in the ground. Welcome, powers of the West. And I call in the powers of the East, grandfather's son, who shines down on grandmother Earth every day. And the creator kept that star, 193 million miles away from us for good reasons, so that we could enjoy life here. So let's not get too quick to try to recreate that technology and blow ourselves up. Welcome this human world where we determining energy, we determine with our free will. Welcome, powers of the East. And I call on the powers of the center of this gathering, the place between the as above and so below, the place of the catalyzing energy of the void, of the not yet. It's a sacred place to be at home with not yet. And we acknowledge that there is a super saturated solution full of hate and fear that is ready to break. And we don't know what incident it will take, but we are the people, and the people will rise around any particular incident and know our power. And this future that seems so dismal will open ways for us to survive yet another day, and perhaps 7 and 7 times 7 times 7 generations. Aho, Omatakias, and all my relations.
Thank you.
Do I have a minute left?
Yes, a minute. Yes, indeed. And you have 63 people on board. So give us another minute, please. And then we're going to.
Okay, I just want to bring, I think we all know who Leonard Peltier is. I just want to bring,
yes.
I want to bring in some, I had to look this up because I remember the journalist that interviewed him, some things he said about himself that I think are important. It was Kevin McKiernan, who was in Pine Ridge. I've been on Pine Ridge twice. So he asked him, let's see, what is your ancestry? So this is Leonard speaking. My father was from Turtle Mountain, Chippewa Nation in North Dakota. My mother is Dakota, the people of white corn, from what is now called Spirit Lake. We were farmers, and my grandfather was actually from Mankato, Minnesota. After the Little Crow War in the 1860s, they hung 38 Indians in Mankato, the largest hanging in the United States. One of them was my great-grandmother's brother, White Dog. There were 300 something indicted, and they had 10-minute trials, 10 at a time. Abraham Lincoln was going to execute everybody, but his aides sent him numerous memos, and this is all on the record, telling him if they killed all those people, he'd be known as a mass murderer. So he stopped at 40. 2 escaped to Canada, and 38 were hung. And he was asked, did you know all this history when you grew up? Yes, I used to sit around and listen to my elders talking. I was born in 1944, and I grew up in apartheid conditions. A candy bar was a rarity, and meat on the table wasn't a regular thing. We had to have a written pass to leave the reservation, even to go shopping or bordering towns. The media was doing major articles calling us the vanishing American Indians. And by 1985, the quote, Termination Act was going to be completed and we would no longer exist. They were implementing the assimilation policies to take the Indian out of being Indian through the boarding schools, which have a horrific history. I was in one of those schools from 9 to 13 years old. And then he talks about the everything, his whole trial. The woman who said she identified him, of course, recounted her testimony, said she was pressured. His health situation is still critical. His next date for to possibly be released is next year. There was a demonstration out in front of the Biden administration that was led by Raul Gravalho, I believe, and also AOC and Bernie and Ilhan Omar, just calling for his release now. We're aware that no president of the United States, Clinton got close, and 500 FBI agents showed up in front of the White House, and he was convinced by, basically there's another story we can go in with the whole cooperation of the White House with certain co-opted parts of the Indian nation that was opposed to AIM, the American Indian Movement. Obama supposedly got close, he got backed off. We pray that there is some president that will have the cojones to do the right thing, no matter what the pressure is. But to know what that pressure is important. So we'll do that in a later show. It's important for us to understand the fascism in that, and that the absolute fear that certain elements have of Leonard and people representing the truth of the American Indian movement being free. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Aho, thank you so much for that, Tatanka. And Leonard Peltier's case, really, we should link, and maybe we'll do it next week, to the Julian Assange case. This is outrageous. It's in, I can't even begin to say how outrageous it is.
If people want, I just will say, I meant to say, the group itself is called Goons, Goons, Guardians of the Oglala Nation. And it's something most people haven't researched that.
Thank you, Tatanka. I want to go, and Wendy, if you could wait a couple minutes, please. I do want to have Pat Morita. Damasio, you're with us for the rest of the hour. I hope. I want to, Pat Morita, our sister in Ohio, has some, Ohio seems to be the where stuff starts in this country, and she's been working. Pat's a great activist. We've known each other for decades. And Pat, if you can give us a 10-minute report on what's happening at Portsmouth, Ohio, because they're moving ahead with the plague of nuclear weapons and power, in which so many first peoples have died in the uranium mines and the Trinity test and all the other stuff. And a lot of that has roots in Ohio, where they're actually wanting to expand it. Pat Morita, could you give us 10 minutes on what's going on at Portsmouth, please? And then we'll go to Damasio. And Aaron, you're with us to talk labor. I hope you can stay through. As you can see, we're in amidst about 20, 30 more minutes on the indigenous. And if you can update us on the strikes, that would be wonderful. Go ahead, Pat. And then I see Dennis Bernstein wants to get a word in. So as soon as you're done, I'll get him.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me, Harvey. And I am one of the coordinators with the Ohio Nuclear Free Network. And I have put a slideshow on if anybody cares to, I won't exactly follow it, but somewhat today, because it has a lot more information than I'm able to talk about today. But we are on the internet at onfn.org for Ohio Nuclear Free Network. It's as simple as that. And I'll put my email in the chat too in a little bit, and you can contact me if you have any questions.
And I've seen the slideshow. Her slideshow is fabulous. It's really worth downloading. We're not going to show it on here because we're in radio, but it's very worthwhile what her slideshow tells us about the uranium industry. So go ahead, Pat.
So I do want to make that connection. Three things to stress when I talk about nuclear issues is to make the connection between the weapons and the power, because, you know, the funding, the technology, education, research, infrastructure, and so much more all overlap. And of course, they compromise the safety in order to get this, in order to have nuclear power at all. So, and then the second thing to remember is that from now on, in particular, the taxpayers are going to pay for all of nuclear because Wall Street won't touch it. So all these nuclear power things that are going on, whether it's power and weapons overlap or whatever it is, it's going to be paid for by you and me. And okay. So
at Portsmouth, we have the enrichment facility, and they're now talking about expanding it, even while they're talking about cleaning it up. Is that right?
So they're trying to do both, and they want to reuse it, everything at the site. So the third thing I want to talk about is like countering the big lie, because we've all heard that nuclear power produces no carbon and zero emissions. So in connection particularly with the Native Americans, we have on our website as well, all about the front end of nuclear power, which is most of you probably understand, but the American public really doesn't, is the uranium mining and milling and enrichment, which is what goes on at Piketon, at the Portsmouth nuclear site that I'm going to talk about. All of that is done. The mining and the milling is done on Native American land, and they've done it on land that has been supposedly, you know, given to these people for the homeland, and yet they've been tricked in one way or another into getting these mines and mills on their land. And then the middle part, the new reactors, they're completely subsidized, and then there's a lot of energy that goes into making a new reactor. So that's not carbon free. And how much carbon and how much energy is going to be used to try to isolate the waste for, you know, the next however million years or so. And on our website, we do have a whole list of a whole lot of, on the slideshow too, a number of industries in the front end. So down at the Portsmouth nuclear site.
And then you've been asked, where is it? Portsmouth is at the bottom of Ohio. If you look at a map of Ohio, the protrusion on the bottom, where along the Ohio River, that is Portsmouth, Ohio, and the next county up is Piketon, where these facilities are. So go ahead.
Yeah, and so Piketon, Ohio is actually the site of it, as Harvey has said, and they have an acronym for it called PORTS. So I sometimes refer to it as PORTS, and sometimes people refer to it as Piketon. So it gets really confusing really quickly. But for these purposes, we'll talk about Portsmouth and PORTS. So the site's nearly 4,000 acres. Of the original plant for uranium enrichment used as much electricity as the city of New York. It covered, the buildings themselves covered over 100 acres. And the worst thing that happened there, besides just enriching the uranium, was that they brought in high-level radioactive waste, and they ran it through all the process buildings. So the entire site is contaminated with transuranics, plutonium, and americium, and particularly a lot of technetium. And now all of that is, of course, going off of the site, even more so as they dismantle it. So
Okay.
I'll go through, there's 4 major things that are happening there right now.
Okay. Go ahead, Pat.
So the first is new uranium enrichment. And you may know that Centrus is building, you may have heard of HALEU, high assay low enriched uranium. Centrus, they're building centrifuges. This is a new enrichment process. And enrichment increases the amount of fissionable or explodable, I guess you could say, uranium in there in order to make a bomb. So this is going to make up to 25%. That alone could make a dirty bomb. They are saying that it's 19.75% that they're going to actually have. That's way too, I want to say, way too precise a figure. But the reason they're saying 19.75% is because at 20%, it cannot be exported. And they want to export this around, and they want to get other countries involved in making building nuclear power so that the United States can get them to be allies. And this HALEU fuel is also proposed for small battlefield reactors, if y'all can believe that. And they did this, the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, okayed this new process without doing the required environmental impact statement. So our organization took them to court about this, but we lost that. And the second thing that's going on there is a new depleted uranium process. Now, depleted uranium is what's left over from uranium enrichment. It has less fissionable uranium, but it's just as radioactive. So, well, now, instead of being waste, of course, it's useful because it's going to be used in nuclear weapons. And that can be used in, it's not bombs, but it's shells and tanks. And you may have heard about this depleted uranium being used in places like Iraq and Afghanistan and the former Yugoslavia. And now these weapons are being used in Ukraine by the US and UK, and quite likely by Russia as well.
Okay.
And so then this is a little more on the speculative side because it depends on whether they get as much funding as they would really like. But 2 new reactors are proposed down there. And so they've already gotten a $5 million grant to start this. And a company called Oklo is promising or planning to build a sodium-cooled fast reactor 2 of them down there. And those plans, they'd like to there are plans down there for enriching uranium and fabricating uranium for the fuel. Fabricating, which is something that's never been done there, is fabricating fuel.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but back in 2022, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission actually denied Oklo's license application for this new reactor.
So, Pat, to wrap up real quick, the Piketon Portsmouth facility right now is pretty much at the heart of the continuation of nuclear power and nuclear weapons. And Steve, could you put up that quote again? Those of you who have heard from apologists for nuclear power, and Piketon is at the center of this because Piketon has been both a military and a civilian facility and still is. And if you look at the quote here in purple, French Prime Minister Emmanuel Macron in 2020 at Le Creusot facility in France said, quote, and never forget this, because and Portsmouth, which Pat is talking about, is the epitome of this. Without civilian nuclear energy, there is no military use of this technology. And without military use, there is no civilian nuclear energy. And Portsmouth Piketon, where Pat is working, is the epitome of that confluence. Pat, can you wrap up in a minute? and tell us how to get in touch with what we need to know?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll put my contact information there, and I'll also remind people of the website and remind people too that, well, and let people know there's a big hydrogen facility. They're hoping to get a part of the $9.5 billion hydrogen subsidies that are being promised. And that's just a dead end for sure down there.
It's an abomination.
And the
Thank
cleanup.
you so much. Thank
Yeah.
you, Pat, for your great work. And keep us posted. And your slideshow is spectacular. So if anybody who wants to pursue this, please look at the slideshow. I believe that Portsmouth and Piketon were not so long ago Miami and Shawnee land. And this was the stomping ground. Southern Ohio was the stomping grounds of one of the great indigenous leaders, Tecumseh, who in the War of 1812 tried to unify the tribes and push the whites out. Didn't succeed, but he was as powerful an indigenous leader as we've ever known. Pat,
Sluggo,
hold on, Mike. You're our own reincarnation of Tecumseh. So thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Mike, go ahead.
yeah, Libby has to leave in a few minutes. So if you want to have a final word from her, you got like 2 minutes to get her in.
Well, okay, we got to get to Damasio. Libby, did you want to wrap up? And then we're going to move to Damasio, and we'll also go to Wendy and Rick LaMonica. But go ahead, Libby, and then Damasio.
Thank you. Two things. First of all, in terms of Portsmouth Piketon, this week on Nuclear Hot Seat, my big interview is with Dr. Michael Ketterer, who is the person who discovered so much about the radiation that has taken place down there. And he does speak specifically about Portsmouth Piketon and some other issues as well. The other thing is that, and Damasio, I know, will be going into this, is that we're working together for the International Uranium Film Festival, which will be coming to the United States in 2024. We are still looking for venues. We are looking for on-the-ground groups or producers that can help us bring this to fruition. We need to come up with funding for it. There's a lot, but people can do this. And one of the goals is to curate the films that are shown in each location, to coordinate with whatever the local issues are that people are dealing with in that area, and to have an event in addition to the film festival itself. So we work synergistically to build public response. And that's part of the goal in 2024.
Thank you so much. And I want to point out that Mary Beth Brannigan has joined us, and the co-maker of the great films, San Onofre Syndrome. And I do want to get to her after we hear from Damasio. But before we do that, very quickly, Damasio, I want to introduce you to someone very important that you need to know, Dennis Bernstein. Dennis, if you can show yourself, Dennis is the great host of the Flashpoint show on KPFA in Berkeley. If we can unmute Dennis. Dennis, are you with us? Dennis Bernstein, are you not with us?
I am with you.
Okay, bro, let's go for it. Dennis, and meet Damasio.
Hello,
Dennis.
Damasio.
Hello, Dennis.
Oh,
I can't
my
see your
video.
face.
okay.
Oh, there you are.
That's why I do radio.
Dennis, I know Dennis very well. He has a great face.
I love radio. It leaves a lot to the imagination.
As opposed to you, Damasio, who's got a really distinctive beard. But go ahead, Dennis. Say what you got to Damasio, and then we're going to give the floor to Damasio. And then Jim and Mary Beth are with us from the San Onofre Syndrome. But go ahead.
Is it me?
Yes, Dennis, please.
Okay. So we're talking about Indigenous Peoples Day. By the way, we were at Alcatraz for the sunrise ceremonies this morning. And if you tune into Flashpoints at 5 Pacific, you can hear some of the things that were going on as Alcatraz once again was freed by the indigenous communities. A number of the indigenous people, Indian people that I've been working with, particularly in the last 48 hours, have their eyes focused on what's going on in the Middle East and what's going on in the indigenous communities there, the indigenous communities of Palestine. I'm not going to get into the whole politic of it, but I'm just going to say there's already been one slaughter, but there's a big one about to happen. And the Palestinian people, once again, are going to be slaughtered. And the world is not going to be watching. I'm very worried about what has already happened, the extraordinary suffering that's already occurred as a result of the fact that in 1948, after a bunch of fascist Europeans tried to wipe out the Jews, the West decided that the Jews needed a place. And so what they would do is they would move over the Palestinians and give the Jews most of Palestine. And it's been an extraordinary problem ever since. And the suffering in the Palestinian community is about to go tenfold. So I want to say in Indigenous Peoples Day that Palestinians belong in Palestine and they don't need to be ethnically cleansed because of a maniac action and because of the horrific stuff that has been carried out in the last couple of days. That's what I have to say about Indigenous Peoples Day.
Our hearts are certainly with the people of that region, and God help us all. It's to have that going on at the same time as the nightmare in Ukraine. You wonder if the theory of evolution actually applies to our species. But thank you very much for that, Dennis. Damasio has been waiting. Damasio, we've got 65 people with us, and that if you can give us 10 minutes, we're definitely going to go into the second hour here. I want to thank Aaron from the labor movement. We do want to talk in the second hour about labor and the incredible uprising of strikes going on in this country now. It's truly amazing. But we are going to slip into the second hour. We have Dorothy Reich with us, Wendy, Rick, Monica. But you're the man right now, Damasio. Do you want to be introduced by Mila Reeson? Mila, did you want to say a couple quick words about Damasio, or you just want to rock and roll?
Oh, sure. Well, let me just say that I'm so pleased to have reconnected with Damasio. I first learned about uranium weapons. We were calling them depleted uranium weapons at the time, way back in the 1990s. And Damasio and I traveled to Mexico with Pia Gallegos to try to warn the Mexican legislature about the waste isolation pilot plant, which is a dump for plutonium contaminated nuclear weapons waste, that opened in 1999 and failed 9,985 years ahead of schedule when on Valentine's Day in 2014, plutonium was sent up through the shafts from the burial site a quarter of a mile below the surface and propelled into the accessible environment. The amount of plutonium contamination was never tracked. Anyway, I'm really pleased to see you with us here, Damasio. And I know there's much more to say about you, but I just want to say thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Damasio. We're glad to have you with us, and please go ahead.
Okay, Mila, I haven't seen you in probably 20, 25 years. A few years ago, I thought maybe I had already done all my work on this depleted uranium issue, and I run off to Costa Rica for 17 years and got lost. And I just came back in the last 3 or 4 years and just recently the Ukraine war broke out, and then I thought, well, I need to get back in shape here and take on this issue, and I can't just leave it alone. And what happened was Norbert Schuschnigg from Brazil, who is the the Secretary General of, well, he's the director of the International Uranium Film Festival. I saw him about 4 months ago in Brazil. I went to their annual Uranium Film Festival there. And while I was there, we talked about doing a tour here in the United States, a film tour. I had done this before back in 2013, but I just went to 3 different sites, and then I had also had a tour in where I was the guy who was a host in Brazil. I went through about 7, 8 cities. But anyway, I've done this kind of work before, and so when I saw him a few months ago, he said he wanted to have this tour here in the United States, and I thought about it, and I went ahead and committed myself, and I told him I would help him, and he appointed me as Southwest Uranium Film Festival Director of the United States, and take that very seriously. And what I did is I went to work right away, and this was about 3 months ago, and I started thinking about the plans and how I was going to go about it, and what cities we want to have on this tour. We're talking about a tour where we take films to different communities and show these films. And we try to find people in those communities, in those areas, who are filmmakers. So we don't just go looking for the top filmmakers around. And even though we have more than 300 films in our library, we look for films that are made locally. And we try, and what we do is we find a community who wants to have these films. We go there, or we communicate with them, and we make decisions on what to do, and try to make it as easy as possible for these communities to have these films without having to go through a lot of big expense. I'm talking about, like really we're a nonprofit. And the only monies that our organization gets is contributions when the filming is over with. During going up to the filming itself, we have a partnership with the communities where they set up the theater and make sure that, and do the advertisement, and then have the volunteers there. And then I'm the one basically that sets these things up, along with Norberg, who is our director. And so once we have people who are, or places that want to have this film, we go ahead and interact with them, and then find a date, and then go there and show the films. And when we go there and show them, we don't just take our films and say, oh, we're going to show you these films. What we do is we say, we have these films. And if you have filmmakers in your local area, we want to see them. And I'm sure the people in the areas want to see them too. So here's what we've done so far. So, we haven't wasted our time. We're looking for nuclear films. And we're looking for filmmakers from local communities. We're not necessarily trying to go out and look for professional filmmakers, which we use their films as well too. But we want to see what local filmmakers are doing in their areas. Here's the kind. We've already begun to look for sites and people and cities and towns that want this. And here's what we got for this coming year. This is we plan to have our schedule during March and April. And we plan to start in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And these are not solid, but we have already made contacts with people in these communities. They say they want the film, and right now we're negotiating with them to get these films there and get the dates. But here's the list that I have as of today, and we've only have 5 confirmed sites, and we have 11 unconfirmed. Unconfirmed means we're in the process of doing this, of setting up the actual screening. We start these dates and places that I'm going to mention aren't necessarily done already. These are
Okay.
things we're working on. I can tell you the ones where we have 5 confirmed, but we start in Albuquerque, that's confirmed. Albuquerque in March 5, 6, Window Rock in March 9, 10, that's confirmed. And then Tucson, March 13th and 14th, and Santa Fe on the 16th and 17th, which is confirmed. Asheville, North Carolina on March 23, 24, which is confirmed. And then we go to Washington, D.C. after that. And then to Seattle in April 13th and 14th. Vancouver, April 17th and 18th. Los Angeles, April 24, 25. Las Vegas, 27, 28. And then in Hawaii, we'll probably go there in probably April or May. Then Johnson City, Tennessee, Jonesboro, Tennessee, Santa Barbara, California, Portland, Oregon, and Norwalk, California.
Well,
These
that's
are-
impressive. That's
That's
very impressive. I want to introduce you to 2 very impressive filmmakers that are on with us. I don't know if you know them already. Mary Beth Brangan and Jim Heddle. Jim and Mary Beth, say hi. We saw their film last night, which premiered in Los Angeles, the San Onofre Syndrome. And you also need to know, of course, Kat Kramer, who does her own film festival. So you've got some really great connections here that you need to, and I do make use of. So if you'll all exchange your contacts in the chat. And Damasio, I do want to introduce you to Jim and Mary Beth. They're based in Bolinas. They have released this incredibly great film about, it's a 2-part film. In the first part, they show the shutdown, the successful citizen campaign to shut down 2 of the biggest nuclear plants in the world at San Onofre, California. And then the second part of the film deals with the nuclear waste issue. And I've known Jim and Mary Beth since the 1800s, and they are truly great filmmakers and great people. So you need to include them in your, this is the, Steve, you're so great, man. This is the poster from the film that opened last night. And it's going to be available online, you see virtual, this coming Sunday. Jim and Mary Beth, you want to say hi to Damasio?
Hi, Damasio and everybody else.
And we just
hope-
heard from Libby, who was also there last night, that Norbert has accepted us into the Uranium Film Festival already. Because you know what? We won. You left before the awards, Harvey. We were awarded the Grand Jury Award.
That's phenomenal. For the best documentary film. And everybody on the call, all of you, you need to be aware there's 62 folks with us. You need to look in the chat, and this film is available free online. Is that right?
No, not yet.
Sunday.
Sunday is our virtual premiere, but that's part of the Awareness Film Festival that we're still in, and they are selling the tickets. We'll have another one that, unfortunately, their website for the ticket purchase is being problematic. So I'm hoping they can fix it by soon.
Okay. Well, you are with the Environmental Options Network. Is that correct?
Ecological.
What is your website? If you'll put it in the chat, that would be great.
Okay, we'll do it.
And
Yeah,
again, everyone.
The name is Ecological Options Network.
Sorry.
Sure.
Ecological Options Network, and you guys it's a great film, and your previous films are also great. So everybody needs to go to their website, please, and see what their work is, and then get in line when the film is available virtually. Damasio and Mary Beth, do you mind if I call on some people?
Can I say something before I get off?
Of course, no, okay. You won't be off if you'll stay with us. That'd be great.
All right, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem.
I had a closing statement.
And by the way, Steve Donziger has just joined us as well.
Oh, hi, Steve. How you doing? Okay, we're in the middle of a discussion here on on filmmaking and Indigenous Peoples Day. And we also have Adam from the labor movement going to fill us in, as usual, full schedule. So let's go to Dorothy, and then Wendy, and then Rick, and then Alex, and then Ruth. Okay, Dorothy, right?
So, I mean, anybody who knows me knows that I've been very involved in the Palestinian cause for a long time. And I just want to recommend a film on that to you. It's called Occupation 101. If you haven't seen it, you should. It'll give you a history of exactly what happened from the time Israel was created until fairly recently. It doesn't go all the way to now. And people ask me, what did you expect? I mean, I've been warning people for years that this was going to explode. There was going to be trouble. You can't keep people oppressed like this and expect that they're just going to take it. They couldn't take it anymore. 260 some odd Palestinians in the West Bank were killed this year before this all happened. And I'm heartsick. I'm heartsick for all my Israeli friends who have lost people in this fighting. I have a friend who's there right now who I'm trying to get out, but she's not even Jewish. She fell in love with an Israeli and went to go visit his family. And she's there in Tel Aviv. They're going in and out of the safe room.
Okay.
So this just didn't have to happen. And but if you want to understand why it happened and how it all started, I recommend Occupation 101.
Thank you for that, Dorothy. And we'll all join in prayers, as they say, and God help us. I have a granddaughter over there.
Oh,
Wendy?
I mean, the goal of having a music festival right outside the fence of an open air prison.
Let's pray for peace. Let's just hope this ends quickly, and I hope that the same thing happens in Ukraine. Our species cannot survive this. I will throw in one small thing here. A number of years ago, we were approached, the Israelis were talking about building a nuclear power plant for commercial purposes. If you can imagine what will be going on. Anyway, Wendy, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't want to cut into Steve Donziger's time. I really appreciate that he's here.
We have
But
Aaron with us too. So
yeah,
go ahead.
and Carolina is here also. So very exciting stuff. I just want to make a couple of points. Forgive my speed talking, but to wrap up, going back to the context with Andrea, but I feel like I'd be remiss for Indigenous Peoples Day if I didn't mention the Tequesta Indians of Florida that were here for at least 10,000 years, that were wiped out when the Spanish came. And just the fact that it's just completely covered up, and it makes you wonder, like, what they were why don't they talk about this? They were here for 10,000 years in a very inhospitable land. What happened with them? You mentioned the Choctaw Indians earlier, or natives, I should say, and they actually fled the South during that occupation and became the Seminole Indians. And a lot of escaped slaves came down and teamed up with the Seminoles, and there was just a lot of mixing and community and culture. And I found out recently there was an underwater railroad for escaped slaves to come through, team up with the natives, and then take boats over to the Bahamas. And I find as well about the author of the very first document of white people calling on the emancipation of slaves came from Francis Pastorius, who is the founder of Germantown, and actually the direct lineage of Jaco Pastorius, the bass player. And he called for slavery to be abolished like 100 years before Thomas Jefferson. And he also wrote about his business with the natives of that area. And at the time they were being called savages. And this is in like the 1600s. And he wrote very eloquently just about how they were like so far less savage than anything that we were. And I would just recommend checking out the writings of Francis Pastorius and looking into the Tequesta tribe. Thank you so much.
Can you spell his name, please, in the chat? Can you put his name in the chat? I can't.
Pastorius.
Yeah,
P-A-S-T-O-R-I. If you'll give it to Steve, our wonderkind, maybe we can find something on him.
Look up greatest bass player in history.
What's that?
I said, look up greatest bass player in history.
Okay, we can do that. Great. Thank you. Thank you for those connections. Rick, Monica, Alex, Ruth Strauss, And then we have Steve Donziger and Aaron, and I want to make sure that Aaron and Steve are connected. Go ahead, Rick and Alex.
I just want to say that Paducah, Kentucky seems like it's real close to that Portsmouth or
Yes, it is.
Ohio. And that's where we were refining some of the early beginning of plutonium or uranium to make bombs for the Manhattan Project, the enriched uranium. It created a big Superfund site. And so it adds, the one in Ohio, one fairly adjacent. And the reason that they started building TVA was they needed the power to run these nuclear enrichment plants in Paducah, Kentucky. And I wonder if anybody has more knowledge, how much power is used in refining uranium fuel rods compared to what the damn power plant can put out. Because my guess, when you put in that and that you have to store the waste forever, that nuclear power is energy deficient.
I have read back in the day that it takes at least 17 years of nuclear power operation to pay back the energy that's put into a nuclear power plant. And we wanted to point out, as Pat pointed out, first of all, the Portsmouth site, and the Paducah site, of course, you're correct, near the Portsmouth site. It's also on the Ohio River. The enrichment facility at Portsmouth uses more electricity than the entire city of New York. And they built two full-scale coal burners to power Portsmouth, and now they want to build a nuclear plant to power the place. And just remember that quote from Macron, nuclear power and nuclear weapons are completely inseparable. Thank you for that. Very good. Alex, and then Ruth, and then I want to introduce both Aaron and Steve. Aaron and Steve. Go ahead. Alex?
I have a question.
Go for it.
How much will it cost for people to get more money?
What's that?
How much will it cost for people to get more money?
I don't know. That's a good question. Thank you for that, Alex. I can't answer. Ruth, go ahead. Ruth Strauss. Ruth is.
Yeah,
You're good. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ruth.
I just wanted to say about the SOS film. It's a wonderful, idea. I know it was a great project in the making for a long time, and congratulations. I'm sure it's going to get a lot of awards. But I did want to say, thank God Mila told me about it last night. I went onto the website, and yes, it is true. It is extremely complex to try to get a ticket. And I signed up for a virtual ticket because I couldn't make it last night because I just found out at the last minute. I have no idea whether I'm going to receive that virtual ticket or not, but I did want to tell you that because Mila said you had noticed that there weren't as many, people showing up as you'd expected. So I am hoping that you will get the website cleared up. Thank you.
Well, everyone should communicate directly with Jim and Mary Beth of the Ecological Options Network. I got that right, in Bolinas. Right. And they're great activists and great filmmakers, and we'll find a way for you to get to see the film. Okay, I think we're good now. Oh, Kat, you wanted to raise your hand, and then I want to talk to Aaron and Steve. Go ahead, Kat Kramer.
Yes, hi. I'm only on audio today, but I just wanted to say congratulations to Mary Beth and Jim for winning the Grand Jury Prize at the Awareness Film Festival. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be there yesterday. I had planned on coming, and I do have Shiros for Change Festival, which is presented by my cinema series, Kat Kramer's Films That Change the World, and I am going to be looking at your film on the link and definitely considering it. Thank you so much for making it. And then I also wanted to just say to Damasio and remind Harvey and Libby that we did have the Atomic Age Cinema Fest that we all did together here in LA, which was the Uranium Film Festival a few years ago. That was the first time it was ever, I believe, in Los Angeles. Right. So I think it's very exciting that it's coming back. And I have a lot of films already that I've curated for my festival, and hopefully, you know, maybe some of them can be included as well.
Thank you. Great.
So
And
thank
Kat-
you so much, though, for being on, and congratulations again.
Thank you, Kat.
And we're honored to have Kat Kramer with us. She's a great fixture and important player in the film community. Also quite an actress, by the way. I just saw something you were in, Kat. Kind of blew my mind. So you're fabulous. I want to jointly now introduce Aaron and Steve. Aaron has been with us, Steve Donziger, Aaron Waslevek. Aaron is a major player in the American labor movement. And I wanted Steve, if you can listen to a 10-minute presentation from Aaron, and then segue your presentation in with what's happening with American labor now. That would be a great thing. Aaron's a terrific presenter. And Aaron, where are you right now, man?
I am in Rhode Island at the moment.
Okay, so whoa, look at that. And Steve Donziger, of course. Steve Donziger, of course, is the legendary attorney who won the gargantuan decision for the Ecuadorian people, and now has since been assaulted by the corporate and legal system, which are, as we know, not separate. Aaron, before Steve comes on, and Steve is a big fan, I know, of organized labor. Can you give us a quick rundown of what's going on with organized labor in this country? It seems like a massive uprising, the likes of which I haven't remembered. But go ahead, give us the scoop.
Well, before I get into it, I want to point something out. Brother Donziger was never afforded the opportunity to actually levy a real defense for himself, and I think that's an important point to point out when it comes to our American justice system, especially when it comes to his law license. Across the labor movement, we're seeing terrific gains. And that's because people are waking up. The AFL-CIO just reported 500,000 new members for the decades. Yeah.
How much?
Really? That's phenomenal. I hadn't heard that. That's phenomenal.
500,000 between the 62 affiliate unions.
Ah.
Okay.
Fantastic.
That's huge. All right. UAW making progress there. We're seeing the new international president as part of that United Change effort that other unions have tried, doing stand-up strikes and being very effective with it. He's put out several comments here recently after he did the bachelor's kind of awarding of roses to CEOs that have been behaving well and giving the members what they want, and explained that, you know, they're not there to cause damage to the employer or to the infrastructure. Rather, they just want their demands heard. So they've completely changed the agenda setting at the table, the tone. The big three came in, obviously, with the upper dominant hand. But Brother Fain has shown that, you know, if we go from a top down to a bottom up kind of organizing model and let members lead bargaining at the table, guess what? People are involved and invested in the outcome. So similar to what we do here in my local, we put members on the bargaining committee and we have members' voices predominate. And then only really where somebody like myself is needed as a business agent, do we step in. So, you know, that goes to the people's first kind of like mentality. Barry Eldon actually had a really good take too on kind of the three-dimensional aspect of power that it takes to turn things around whenever you're in any given situation. But wielding power is probably one of the hardest things we've ever done in the labor movement. This is a once in a generation opportunity. It's once in a generation clawback, because actually what we're seeing is we look at it as growth right now, but we're recapturing what we've lost since World War II. And the goal here, amongst those of us that care about organizing in large numbers, is to come back in terms of millions, not just a few thousand here and there. Business unionism killed the United States of America's labor movement. It made our membership dwindle. We went to a density-driven model that, you know, for at least 2 or 3 decades was our greatest antithesis, because we left workers out in the rural areas unorganized. Nowadays, I can just say from experience, we're knocking doors in the country and we don't care. If somebody wants a fair shake, fair square on their plate, healthcare, retirement security, and all that stuff, we're going to fight for them. So up at UAW, the two major issues that are, you know, stagnating right now at the table between the big three are healthcare retirements post retirement or healthcare benefits, sorry, post-retirement, and then pension benefits, which isn't surprising. You know, my generation, I think a lot of us would be surprised, and Gen Y and millennials, to find out that it used to be the norm for employers to pay for your healthcare benefits after you retired. Who would have guessed? Right. Same with pensions. The fact that we have these special financing applications coming in from the Butch-Lewis Pay Act that are making all the critical and declining pensions solvent through 2051 is a major big deal. We all know what happened with the Central States Pension Fund and UPS doing its mass withdrawal a few years ago. People were literally getting, you know, monthly pension checks to the amounts of $5. Some are pennies. But thanks to Uncle Joe there up at the White House and the Butch-Lewis Pay Act, they've reinvigorated the system with regulated funds that are going to be accounted for and backed by the Pension Guaranty Benefit Corporation, which is the United States government. So for the first time in a long time, the American labor movement has stepped up to the rise to challenge, and it looks like we're swinging for the fences and hitting every ball. I mean, we're batting 1,000. What we have to be careful for in organized labor is honestly being victims of our own success. And I think that's easy to say, it's hard to do. But if you look around and you look at these membership numbers and regrowth, you look at the contracts that are being negotiated and you look at the results, it's amazing. I can tell you for myself, I took a group of valets that for over 60 years have fought for healthcare, and one negotiation session got them paid for healthcare and pensions. So it's not impossible. People just need to keep that mindset, that working class mindset of organizing. And I think that when we look back on these kind of foundational moments in the last couple of decades, we start to see that, you know, baby boomers and our parents kind of instilled in us this protest movement kind of mentality. And then where it doesn't work out in the courtrooms, one of the things I'm fond of saying rather is we just take it to the streets, because we can always win in the streets. Right. So a lot of bosses are walking around kind of timid. The board is constantly changing its rules and regulations in our favor. We've seen a lot of recent decisions indicating that things might even sweepingly go more favorably in terms of exclusive representatives or organized unions. There should be some changes to Weingarten coming up based off of General Counsel's memo soliciting advice. Work rules, where they're not reasonably tailored, or rather narrowly tailored and reasonable, or in the least restrictive means, are now knocked out. There was a case, Teamsters versus Stericycle. If you're not familiar with Stericycle, it's a garbage ass company ran by garbage ass people. And their HR can catch these hands because we get it every day. And at the end of the day, they've been harassing my brethren left and right. And you know, they got NLRB'd, and now they are case law.
Well, listen, you know, Aaron, aside from having the best radio voice on the call, it's always great to have you on to ground us in the labor movement, which is absolutely essential to the progressive left in this country. And nobody knows that better than Steve Donziger. I don't know if you two guys have met. Steve, do you want to jump in here with Aaron and talk about labor and then the indigenous and your own court cases and where we stand? Aaron, it's great to have you with us. Put your links in the chat, please, and keep coming back. But stay with us now. Let's talk to Steve. Steve Donziger, where are you? Did I lose you? You should obviously be in touch, Aaron, with Dennis Bernstein, the host of the Flashpoint show. We don't hear enough about labor in the progressive movement. There you go. Steve, you're with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, and see you. So there you go. So meet Aaron.
Fabulous.
Aaron, meet Steve.
We bet. Hey, Aaron, thank you for that summary. It's so encouraging to hear that. You know, I've been doing some appearances with Chris Smalls, who organized the Amazon union in Staten Island, a fellow New Yorker, but he's, you know, trying to do a lot of organizing of Jeff Bezos's company and has had some degree of success. You know, I think it's critical to combine the movements, you know, the environmental movement, the climate justice movement, the labor movement must come together, in my opinion, if we're going to create significant real change in this country that we're all fighting for. And, you know, what you're doing is frontline stuff. It's critical. You know, the conflict between capital and labor People don't want to talk about it in those terms, but it really is it's the root of everything, almost everything that goes on. Let's like not avoid it. And I think the reason why our country has, the trends in of recent decades toward right-wing extremism and massive inequality of wealth has so much to do with what you talk about and how, the labor movement has been weakened and, partly by its own doing, the sort of sellout leadership and, partly just by policies where, the wealthy and the corporate sector basically use government to wage class warfare on the poor and the working class. And, people don't want to use terms like class warfare or capitalism or the conflict between capital and labor, but like we have to have, in my opinion, we have to have clear language, so we can have clear analyses of reality so we can create the best strategies. So I salute you, my friend, and all of your colleagues. What you're doing is vital, vital, vital. And, when I think about my own work as a lawyer, environmental justice lawyer, someone who's fought for indigenous peoples for many years, peoples in the Amazon of Ecuador against Chevron, it's all connected, it really is. And we're just not going to get there unless we understand those connections and understand how to combine these movements, not just labor and environmental justice, but also criminal justice and, the movement to reform the criminal justice system and policing, the movement for healthcare justice, for housing. It's all connected. And I think only with a stronger labor movement do really the broader movements have any hope of fundamentally changing these misalignments that we have in our country now that make us so. Can you still see me? I just got, oh yeah.
Yeah. No, Steve put up some great visuals here.
Okay. In any event, that's my take. And I thank you and I look forward to meeting you in person.
I want to throw in one thing that everybody should never forget this. The first people that Hitler put in the concentration camp at Dachau were the labor organizers.
Mm-hmm.
They were his very first target.
And look at Ecuador, right? No unions, right? How easy is it to take over the working class of the local villages, and then use the very same levers of corruption and power from the government?
Yeah.
I mean, Steve, you're right on the money. It's the principal force by which the working class is really going to be the vocal majority, right? And we're underrepresented.
Yeah. And I'll say this in the law. I mean, I'm a lawyer, although I've been disbarred without a hearing, first lawyer ever. But, we all know this being progressives, but like it bears repeating. Okay. The law is a mechanism that does not lead, it follows what happens among the people, among the street, among labor organizing, among climate justice organizing. And, in the climate justice field, we're seeing an increasing number of cases in really the last few months that are finally moving forward. Judges are moving them forward. And after being stalled for years, and it's clearly a response to organizing in the climate justice movement and in the labor movement, and a lot of lawyers are out there doing some really creative things right now in various areas. I mean, it's astounding the number of creative litigation strategies that I'm observing around the world and in the United States that are like gaining traction because judges are actually starting to understand that to save the system, they've got to give. I mean, these systems have to give more to the working class and more to communities of color and communities that have historically been completely screwed in our political system.
Recognizing that, like in Providence, one of the things that we did was we just passed a resolution. Providence, Rhode Island is now the first climate job city in the world.
That's awesome.
We're focusing on clean energy and we're doing it in tandem, right? Labor and environmental organizing, because as we all know, these organizing circles are the same people, just with different hats, right? And different organizational titles. But at the end of the day, we all run together.
Well, speaking of which, the synergy also, I'm not sure if you've been on Aaron, I know Steve has with Andrea Miller and Ray McClendon, who have pioneered the relational grassroots kind of organizing for getting out the vote in the BIPOC communities. And that kind of organizing with Steve's work and with your work really needs to synergize. And we've also, of course, been talking about making a movie about Steve and his work. We have got filmmaker, a buddy of mine, David Saltman, on that we need to connect and continue to push ahead with. So this is all really, really good. Dorothy has a hand. Dorothy, when you have a hand, we all listen.
A problem we have here in California is resistance from the unions because the solar industry is not unionized. And I want to ask you, what is labor doing about organizing workers in the solar industry? Because it's a big problem here.
It is. It's amazing. I will throw in, and Dorothy knows this, and Dorothy was just at Steve was just at Dorothy's house. A wonderful event. Thank you for that, Dorothy. It was really great. But in California, there are 1,800 unionized workers at the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant and 70,000 non-unionized workers in the solar industry. And guess who has more clout? So, that's a huge, as Dorothy's 100% right, is that we have to unionize the solar industry.
Yeah, but what we're talking about is top down versus bottom up organizing, right? The NLRA allows both. And unfortunately, what those workers are trapped in is a contractor model. For the electrical workers specifically, it's called NECA, the National Electrical Contracting Association. So all IBEW locals have to deal with NECA. And NECA contractors obviously are the primary source of hiring hauls. What you're facing is this. It's a lack of ground game organizing with that membership base. I can tell you as an IBEW member out of Florida, we love green energy. I mean, it's work. It is work.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, to your point, there's a disconnect. Why would a group of workers with high amount of skills and labor value not want to work? And that's usually it's seen as a cautionary tale, right? And so if you look at the UAW just transition model to electrical vehicles and what they're trying to push throughout the entire labor movement, that's part of the answer.
Well, they did it at GM, but the question is, what are we going to do about it? We can say why we can't do something about it, but that's not helpful. We have to figure out how we can do something about it because it's screwing up the whole.
Yeah, it's really hurting us.
The planet.
And I got to insert today, just today, a phenomenal breakthrough in the New York Times. They have a piece on the front page that Vermont, the primary utility in Vermont, recovering from the big storms, does not want to put up new power lines. They want to lease a battery to every home. Completely revolutionize the grid. And this is the utility doing it. And that stuff's got to be unionized. If we have the unions behind that with a utility, we can completely transform. And it's exactly the opposite what Gavin Newsom is doing in California.
Well, look at what we did in California, right? As the Teamsters. I mean, we sent all of our trucks out there nationwide just to let Gavin know we're not too happy with
them. Well, I hope they were electric trucks. Steve, did you want to jump in with that? I'm going to go to Lynn Feinerman.
They weren't electric, by the way.
They will be.
Just give us the fine.
Steve Donsiger, you want to jump in here? And this is a great conversation. Thank you for bringing that up, Dorothy. I mean, that's a huge deal. The non-unionization of the solar industry, that's got to change. Steve, you want to?
Can I just make a couple of disparate points that are
Please,
mildly
yeah,
connected? I just want to get this off my chest. First, I want to thank Dorothy, who has become my friend and a huge support pillar to me and my family and the people of Ecuador. Hi, Dorothy. Thank you for what you're doing. Really appreciate it. The second thing
is such a joy that I got to know you.
Well, we got a lot. We're going to be causing a lot of trouble together, I suspect. The second thing I want to say is today is Indigenous Peoples Day. And as you know, I've worked for many years in Ecuador on behalf of 5 indigenous peoples and other non-indigenous Amazon communities fighting Chevron over pollution. And I want to just acknowledge my clients in Ecuador who are still suffering tremendously and have never collected the money that they legitimately won in this historic lawsuit, and who have been really wrecked by oil development in Ecuador that has led to massive pollution and likely thousands of deaths from cancer. And this is obviously happening in a relatively isolated area of the world. Not enough people know about it, despite our best efforts to do something about it and publicize it. So on this day, I just want to acknowledge those people, as well as all indigenous peoples all over the world, who are the real frontline defenders of the earth. Some of you might know, can I just say one other quick thing?
Please, yes.
So when I went to prison, you know, Chevron prosecuted me privately for criminal contempt of court in this really bogus, irregular, illegal, corrupt legal case where I never got a jury. And I ended up serving almost 3 years in detention, including 6 weeks in a federal prison. When I went to prison, I was sent a book by an indigenous lawyer, which I'm holding right here. I don't know if you can see it. Okay, I want to mention this book and encourage people, if you don't know it.
Well, give us the title, because we're on radio.
I'm sorry. It's called In the Courts of the Conqueror.
And who's the author?
The subtitle is The 10 Worst Indian Law Cases Ever Decided. And the author is Walter R. Eco Hawk, who's an indigenous leader from Oklahoma, who's a scholar. And I want to mention this. I went to law school. I got a very good education, good universities, went to Harvard Law. Until I went to prison, like over 30 years after I got out of law school, and read this book. Okay, I had never understood the extent to which the law was used as a tool for land theft and oppression of the original inhabitants of our territories here in what is now called the United States of America. And it really made me realize as a lawyer how completely deprived I was of a well-rounded education and a critical education, because I'm a critical thinker generally, and I didn't really know the extent to which this went on. And it's all in this book, which should be required reading in every university, in every law school in the country and the world, to really understand the deep, really origins of injustice in our country. So I just wanted to mention that in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day. Again, the book is called In the Courts of the Conqueror by Walter R. Eco Hawk.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Matt. We still have 55 people on with us after almost 2 hours. Steve, Aaron, Dorothy, Tatanka, it's great to have you on. This is a fantastic gathering here. We are, of course, praying for peace in the Middle East and in the Ukraine. Thankful there are no nuclear plants in Israel, but there are in my 2 cents worth is that Zaporizhia really needs to be taken over by the UN or some global body before we have another nightmare. Your point on the law is incredibly important, Steve. I'm sure, Aaron, you know many lawyers who've made a big difference for the union movement. So let's keep going on this. We'll get to you to talk in a minute, but Lynn Feinerman and Justin.
Harvey, can I just want to
go ahead.
Damasio to Stephen Donziger and Aaron.
Yes, and Damasio, there has been a film made about you, Steve. It's an old one. I don't know if you want to recommend it to Damasio for the Uranium Film Festival. Something to consider. And if Dave Saltman and I can ever get it together, we'll get a film out about you as well. Lynn Feinerman, a great radio host and regular with us, quite a brilliant woman. Lynn, do you want to chime in here?
Thank you, Harvey. Those are very kind words. I would like to say, first of all, Steve, a longtime big admirer, a small supporter, not able to be a big one. I have done some radio work with numerous Indigenous women activists in South America, Ecuador, and Colombia, etc. And I wonder if you, speaking of organizing, if there is a way that the movement can be expanded to include groups like Sabo Alliance and other groups that are in South America that are largely women-based, and a number of women have come here to speak at Pioneers and other places, Namonten and Kimo, who's related to Amazon Frontlines, and numerous other activist women, Gloria Hilda Ushigwasanti. And I'm wondering, because they've had some really substantial successes in kicking Chevron and others out of their territories, I'm wondering how they can be brought in to the worldwide organizing scheme.
Is that directed at me?
Yes.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Thank you for your support. Really appreciate it. Well, you know, the work they do is vital to justice, you know, climate justice and justice in the Amazon. You know, just so people know, in the Amazon of Ecuador, which is an oil producing region, you know, Texaco and now Chevron completely wrecked the northern part of Ecuador's Amazon, where my clients live and where I've done work for 25 years, where some of these frontline groups work is more in the middle and southern part, where oil companies have tried to get in there and drill in these extremely delicate ecosystems, some of which are homes to non-contacted indigenous groups. You know, this is the true front lines of the planet, and in terms of preserving our planet. And the work that they have done has been just tremendous in terms of keeping out these oil companies. And, you know, it's a combination of good old fashioned organizing, legal strategies, public relations strategies, and just pressure. So, you know, the fundamental problem, this might be too much information, but I'll mention it, is, you know,
we never have too much information on these calls, Steve. That's what they're for.
I
Maybe
feel
we
like I'm
should
talking a
rename them.
lot. I feel like I'm
Too
talking a
much
lot.
information calls, but go ahead.
Yeah, but I mean, this is crazy. I mean, again, I apologize if people know this, but the way these governments, the government of Ecuador being no exception, get around sort of the need to adhere to international law as regards indigenous rights, which requires free, informed, and prior consent before any oil company goes into territory, is they basically grant land rights to the indigenous groups, sometimes based on their historical territory, but they keep subsoil rights. I mean, think about that. It's like you can have this land and put a fence on it, although that's not how most indigenous groups think. It's a very Western concept of fence, but the government will try to sell subsoil rights to, say, a foreign oil company on territory legally owned by indigenous peoples. And it's just, that right there in a nutshell is the nub of so much conflict around the world between, you know, the fossil fuel industry and the protectors of the planet. Right there, that one legal fiction that governments say we retain subsoil rights to your land and we can sell it off, you know, without your consent, or maybe with the consent of some fake elected, you know, leadership group, you know, is how they get around legal restrictions on respecting indigenous rights. And you see this all the time in Ecuador, and the people that Lynn was referring to have become really savvy in terms of preventing this little legal trick from being implemented in Ecuador, such that they've literally kept out, you know, oil development from huge areas of the Amazon that, you know, if you want to look at it objectively, it's cost Ecuador's government billions of dollars in revenue, but it's preserved, I would argue, 10 times that amount in terms of the value of the rainforest and what it does for the lungs of the planet and for the sustainability of the planet, which benefits all human beings, all of humanity, and all of life species. You know, it's not just us. There's lots of other species on the earth that need to be respected. So I salute them. And yes, there needs to be more connections between those folks and the great work they're doing and the work Aaron's doing and the work we're doing, you know, in other parts of the Amazon. By the way, it'd really help me if I could get my passport back so I can go back down there. I haven't been to Ecuador in 5 years because they won't let me leave the country.
God,
Oh.
You know,
unbelievable.
Steve, it's an interesting point that you bring up about passage of title and land, right? Like we've been trapped in this quagmire of Macintosh since the 20s or so, or before then.
where, you know, the United States court ruled that title never passed back to Native Americans. Thus, the title passed Native Americans to either the British, the Spanish, or whichever occupying country, and then successively onto the United States government. And it wasn't until recently that we've seen a court change that perspective. And I dropped it in here. It's the Pueblos in Colorado won their water rights back subsurface, which is a huge change. But what they were doing, you get it. They were interpreting Spanish law on a Spanish matter. I mean, completely separate aside from the United States president. And the court did it in such a searchingly way that they tried to not disturb Macintosh. But if you see the end result, which is, you know, this native tribe was given back their water rights, and there are long remedies to be paid back to them for the robbing of those water rights.
Yeah.
First and many for subsurface rights, but we also have, above or ad astra rights, right? Like up to the stars. And I mean, you know, go look at Cosby. I mean, it's pretty historic when you think about the impact that we have as a country on Native American lands, and we just try to find and rationalize these little deflections to, well, you know, it would be a taking, but we're not killing your chickens with sonic booms. Or it would be subsurface mining, but we're drilling sideways. See, so that's completely legitimate.
Okay.
And you go down to Ecuador, and I mean, you're probably the most familiar person here, but the amount of trickery that, you know, all the corporate interests got involved with to just run those little villages in Indiano law, which completely prohibited them being there in the first place until the national government stepped in. Is just atrocious, and they wouldn't have been able to do so without mega funding in the coordination of multiple governments, not just one.
Right.
And I mean, you know, a lot of times people just kind of write this story off as, hey, it's you know, big business versus the little man. But that's not just what's happening down there in Ecuador. You have genetic mutation that's going on, right? You have pockets of petroleum chemicals that are never going to leave. There is no, you know, remedial effort in terms of real lasting impact to the environment being done. And I mean, it's disgusting. It's disgusting to have an American government, right, that backs this corporate interest. You took on, you rightfully beat the hell out of them. And then they got so sour, right, that their successor in interest came up here and got you on a contempt just to play the, you know, who has a law license game.
Well, they and it's thuggery basically and thievery. It's a terrible combination.
I can say,
I got to say we're at
I'm disgusted that they did that to Steve. It's disgusting that they didn't allow him to have a defense. There was no notice and opportunity to really be heard. It was more of a contempt hearing, and that's it.
Well, we have mentioned previously on the show also Leonard Peltier, this being Indigenous Peoples Day. It's insane what's happening with him, and and Julian Assange as well. Steve's right up there in that triumvirate. I hope that's a doobie you're smoking. We don't allow cigarettes on the show here. So okay, well, thank you for that, Aaron. I want to go to Justin. Justin's always got something smart to say.
Tatanka's had his hand up before Justin.
Oh, okay. Tatanka, go for it, bro.
Thank you. God, I got about, you know, a whole handful of things now, but very quickly I'll do them. We need to, back to before this discussion, we need to reframe the energy issue as also a peace and war issue. It has everything to do with full spectrum dominance, and we need a life economy and life culture, which the indigenous people of South America have orchestrated a lot of that conversation, and it has to involve labor. So the Silkwood story, Karen Silkwood, is a labor story. You know, people don't even think of it that way. She was a labor organizer for the oil, chemical, and atomic workers. And she was assassinated, not for getting information out about radiation. I think that was getting out, but because when she was on her way to the New York Times reporter, she was talking about fissile material going from Kerr-McGee to Israel and to Iran. That was the story that didn't get out. To the labor with IBEW and with the solar industry, in the work that Romero Institute was doing to get the first bill passed, which we did, around electricity in California. It involved IBEW behind the scenes working with environmentalists, and we had a plan to transition with the top IBEW labor or leadership, because they just had an election of a new president there that came into Sacramento, and we've been working with the people who are life friends with his, to transition and to propose to the employers something we thought was possible, to transition to career jobs in solar. This was also sabotaged by Newsom getting in bed with the utility companies and, pushing to reopen, because he reopened Diablo Canyon after the shutdown, which I live 15 miles from it. So Linda Seeley and I and Harvey and others are brainstorming about the next stage, because we don't want that to open. Okay, Steve, thank you for that book. I'm probably, along with you, one of the few people that know about the book, because I work with Danny Sheehan, right? So yeah, I heard about it from Danny and Sarah. Otherwise, I wouldn't know about it. I also just heard from Danny about over the weekend that within, I think, 3 days of handing his RICO lawsuit over to Rob Bonta, Attorney General in California, to hold the oil companies in California responsible for their mayhem and death and thievery and all that. And as you know, it's a way of piercing the corporate veil and holding board members responsible and holding stockholders responsible, a lot of parties responsible. So there's a lot of research done on this. Within about 3 days, he got his call from the top oil company, who he hasn't spoken with yet in California. So just to let people know about that.
Well, the critical thing we're doing now in California, Tatanka, if I can jump in, the Diablo Canyon Nuclear Unit 1 is currently shut for their periodic refueling. And Newsom has stabbed us in the back on the deal that was cut in 2016 to shut those reactors. And this is our window of opportunity. It's easier to keep a reactor shut than the shut one that's open. And so the Mothers for Peace, we are all flat out trying to get whatever legal, regulatory, and political relief we can get to keep this reactor shut. It's insane. It's embrittled, it's cracked, it's surrounded by earthquakes. When earthquake faults, when people say, are you for and against nuclear power? The right answer is, well, which reactors are you talking about? And these two in California are the very worst. And this fight in California to keep Diablo on target with the deal that was cut, and we had a deal that the unions signed off on to shut these two reactors. And the nuclear industry, we're seeing more and more now how important the military aspect is of atomic power. This push to keep Diablo open makes absolutely no economic sense, even for the utility company. It's all military. And so that's where we're at with this. Steve was in California, got his ears full of this, but this is the big deal. Tatanka, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple more things. While I'm on the call with you, Steve, did you send that email to Sarah yet? Sarah Nelson, RE Danny. If you did, I'll bug her. If you didn't, I'll bug you.
I didn't send it, but please tell her we need to connect.
Okay. All right. And also, I mean, the
Danny Sheehan, in my opinion, is one of the greatest lawyers in American history.
Well, you know what you and he hold in common. You really have to think. You have to think like an organizer, and you, especially in law today, with the way the Supreme Court is, you have to team up with organizers, or else you can't really get anything done. And you have that in common, and you're really doing a great job on that.
Well, thank you. But it's why they disbarred me, right? And I'll tell you.
I know.
They want the way they educate lawyers is in America is they want you to, if you don't stay within the four corners of the law, okay, They don't
Yeah, I
want you to be in the profession. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, you
But
and Michael
it's the
Cohen have,
law.
you
It's
and
the
Michael
law
Cohen
as
have
they
something
see
in
it.
common. What?
It's the law as they see it. There
The
are
law as
some
they
laws
see it.
that are legitimate laws that they really don't want to have applied, like say, one man, one vote. That
And,
one,
and to that, and the other point I was going to make, Aaron, thank you. Yes, the creativity that lawyers can exhibit. I mean, I saw this first up because I was honored to be a part of negotiations with the UFW, and there was just Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, myself, and Jerry Cohen. Jerry Cohen was so friggin' creative. Oh my gosh, the things he did were I mean, it blew my mind. But it's because he didn't think, as coming out of UC Berkeley or out of Harvard. He was on the strike. He was on the line. He was doing the boycotting. And so you start thinking like an organizer, and you start strategizing like that, and then all kinds of new possibilities open up. So thanks for your report.
really, I got to
know
point
those
out
numbers about the new members. That is great.
that's phenomenal. 500,000 new members. That's phenomenal. I got to point out where it's 4:00 Pacific time, 7 Eastern. Steve Caruso and Mike, if you can keep this call going, we'll go to our traditional 4:20 target, if that's okay. So everybody can go out and toke up at 4:20, but we usually supposed to end now. But Steve, if you can stay with us, that'd be great. And Aaron and Tatanka, everybody. We still have 47 people on with us. I mean, it's fun. Your attention span. I couldn't have kept 47 college students this long, believe me. Justin LeBlanc always has great things to say, and then Brian Steinberg from Michigan. Go ahead, Justin.
Sure. So we've been talking a lot of great details, and some of that people may or may not have familiarity with, so it may go over their head. So I'm basically going to try to summarize some of what we've said and make it accessible, right? So laws are levers, just like any other sort of thing that Archimedes talked about way back when. And, it's a math of how can I have this advantage versus that advantage, right? And most human negotiations are that way. They're not based on the immutable physical principles. They're based on the mutable contracts, as Aaron talked about. And so what I want to say is, let's take things from a creative perspective of, you talk about hidden rights of things. Well, first off, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, progressive era, no laws existed for the protection of those workers who were organizing. In fact, they were beaten up because they were violating other so-called property laws, and even striking in places that belonged to the employer by property rights, even though the labor was their work and their possession that they could withhold or give as they wanted. But let's take this into a modern context.
Okay, but you got to do it quickly, Justin.
30 seconds.
Good.
Don't actually hold a strike in the parking lot of the retail store. Hold a tailgate party for your sports team. And then
I love the way you think, man. This is exactly what I do to bosses that piss us off. We go cook them and their neighbors breakfast, and we sit out there all morning.
Good for you. Good for you, Justin. Good for you too. Thank you for that. And Brian Steinberg, are you in Ann Arbor? Brian, are you in?
Yeah, I just wanted to do a quick report. There's something really, a lot of stuff we talked about is really happening in Michigan too, on probably a little micro level. One big thing is we are trying to de-Custer Michigan. There is a Custer statue in Monroe, Michigan, right downtown. There's actually, if you read about it, look up Wikipedia, Custer statue. We're trying to get his name off of a park there. So Indigenous Day, let's talk about de-Custer, not custard, de-Custering
I like
Michigan.
that.
And I'm part of a movement who's trying to do that locally.
I have actually stood and spoken on that statue.
Oh, okay. So okay.
Because Monroe, Michigan, as you know,
Look at that.
Monroe, Michigan is the home of the Fermi nuclear plant, which
Okay, yeah.
partially blew up in 1966. But I will caution you that that statue, because it's near the nuke, is highly radioactive, and I wouldn't spend much time there. Okay,
Okay, so
real
that's the
quickly
thing.
then.
The other thing is we are now in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I live. We're working really toward doing community energy. We're trying to get off DTE. And I can just tell you personally, we had so many power outages. And this is Ann Arbor. If we're in Detroit, power outages last 2 to 3 times longer because it's Detroit. They don't give a shit about Detroit. This is like suburban witch Ann Arbor. They last forever. I've thrown out my refrigerator's contents 2 times already and got rid of my Costco membership because bulk food doesn't make sense in Michigan anymore because you can't freeze food because you can't keep your food fresh because a 2-3 day blackout. That's it. CDC says it's 2 days. So we're looking on consumer energy. And also I'm part of a group now that's trying to get power, like these smaller Blue Eddy power packs to Detroit vulnerable communities for power outages. So I thought
you got to look at what this utility in Vermont is doing.
Yeah, I know. So that's why it's really fascinating.
Big deal.
We're looking to do grant monies to give temporary power to seniors who can shelter in place during a power outage, electric blankets for the winter. So it's like really becoming dire now in Michigan, the grid or the whatever. DTE really sucks, and we're finally seeing some traction to go after them. And
well, you need to get Michigan-made batteries in the basements of every home in Michigan.
Well, we can talk about that. And the last thing I want to talk about
these batteries, as we've mentioned on this call, the battery technology is about to massively shift from lithium to sodium. And lithium is lighter and more mobile. So lithium batteries will stay with cars, but at least for a while. But in the basements of homes, if this jump can be made to sodium-based batteries, the cost is going to plummet. And this model that's being developed in Vermont is huge, and the union movement's got to get into it. I got to tell you one quick story. In 1976, I was writing an article for Mother Jones about the coming of the solar industry in connection with labor, because I was working with a guy named Richard Grossman, a wonderful guy who pioneered that, passed away since. But I talked to the president of the Sheet Metal Workers Union, whose name was Ed Carlo. And he later got into legal trouble. But the sheet metal workers were totally behind solar, even in the 70s. So this is a big deal. Go to the unions, get these batteries into the base. Everybody's thinking of batteries for cars. That's fine. But in the basements of homes, that's where the ultimate real shift is going to be made.
And if you look up solar, you'll see the reason why sheet metal people like it is because the rigging and the contracting to put them on the roofs, that's where a good amount of the money comes from. It's not just the panels. So they certainly want more rigging, more stuff. And lastly, I'm in Michigan. We're seeing UAW all over Facebook. I have lots of friends. We're really making it happen here in Michigan, all over the state. We got a great protest going on here, signs, local meetups, local people waving, getting cars honking, etc. We're all over the Michigan right now for the UAW. So just want to tell you, we're here. Check it out. You'll see everyone I know on Facebook's all for the union stuff. So it's super strong here. You're muted, right? You're muted, Harvey.
Harvey, I just texted some organizers I know in Vermont that are going to be looking into that. It's a hell of an organizing opportunity. You're absolutely right.
Oh, I was muted. Anyway, did you hear anything I said about the batteries? Oh, well, I think the key with the UAW, everybody knows batteries are going to change the world. And if there's this transition from lithium to sodium in batteries, the sodium is going to be too heavy for cars, but the lithium is too expensive for the homes. But if this transition is made to sodium-based batteries, and you follow the Vermont model, which I've seen on today's New York Times, and have the utilities start putting batteries in every basement, you can take down the wires, for God's sakes. And what prompted this, especially in Vermont, was that this wave of storms that they just had, and the utilities are looking at having to rewire. They don't have to rewire if you put batteries in the basement. And not accidentally, the head of the Vermont utility that's going to do this is a woman. And, not accidentally, the prime minister who put Germany towards zero nuclear plants is also a woman. So we're talking about Indigenous Peoples Day. We can also talk about what I consider, just throwing this in the middle, the biggest power transition in the history of the human race is now going on, and it's the shift of power from men to women. And that's what's really happening as well. So that's why the men are also freaked out, and why I wind up with a macho idiot like Donald Trump. So, Brian, thanks for that. Keep it up in Ann Arbor. Great to have you with us. And speaking of women in power, let's go to Wendy Lederman. Go ahead, Wendy. And Steve, thank you for sticking with us. Let us know if you got to go home. But a group like this, you do not turn down. This is just phenomenal to be with all these great people. Go ahead, Wendy.
Thank you. And if I can stay as well if you need to keep us going. Yeah, and I was actually thinking of the point you made about women. Carolina had to hop off, and I think we lost Donziger too, and he was having a little trouble logging in. So I don't know if he'll be back on, but I wanted to give a shout out to her because she's not only from Ecuador, but also heavily involved in the indigenous, or I'm sorry, the labor movement. So maybe Lynn might want to connect with her. As Stephen was very happy to meet her last time.
You brought Aaron with us, so you're connected to us. So you're connected, Aaron, right?
Yeah, no, what Wendy's saying is that Carolina is also an organizer for the United Teachers of Dade and is actively fighting Ron DeSantis and his crazy stuff.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
and all the healthcare, like she's major with healthcare, and I met Aaron through Carolina. They're Teamsters together. So just two quick points that I was going to bring up with Stephen, but definitely worth bringing up. I wanted to ask him again his take on the constitutional amendments, because that's how Ecuador won their last victory, and that's something that is, I think, a really big tool that can be used not only for labor to create more jobs, but also just leverage and getting out the vote, and just part of the puzzle. And I did want to mention the child labor laws that are being stripped right now.
Oh
I
yeah,
can't remember.
I did want, yeah.
Thank you. I can't remember. There's one other state. It's a Midwestern state. I can't remember which. That was lowering its protections, but now Florida is following suit. There's a bill. I thought it had passed.
Iowa.
Thank you, Dorothy. Yeah. So Florida right now wants to strip a century-old labor protection for kids. They want to let 16 and 17-year-olds, maybe just 17-year-olds, work past 11 o'clock and beyond 8 hours on school nights and beyond 30 hours a week during the school year. And to say that it's to like help the families reach their financial goals and create opportunities, but really it's to compensate for all the immigration reforms and all the migrant workers that they're losing, and they have nobody to do the work. And also Purdue and Tyson are under investigation right now because, you know, with factory farms, journalists and reporters, cameras are not allowed in to see how the animals are treated and what goes on in these factory farms. So nobody knows that there's little children working there in like crazy conditions. So there's an investigation right now. But yeah, our crackdown on the immigrants are now turning to this stripping of child labor laws, which is just ironic because we're trying to pass an abortion amendment to protect abortion rights. And yet they care so much about children that, you know, I'll let that speak for itself. Thank you.
Yeah, really. Well, they're worried about their labor force.
Having grown up
Aaron,
with, I worked one of my earliest jobs for an employer that wanted me to stay till 2 a.m. My dad was the Central Labor Council president for the AFL-CIO. So the second night it occurred, he called me up there and he's, "What are you doing past 11?" I said, "I'm working like my boss told me to." I can't say it because I guess we're on the Progressive Network, so I can't say exactly what he said, but he said basically, "Hand your boss the phone." And I was home for 5 minutes. He started to file a FLSA complaint in an unfair labor practice. And that's when I found out that it doesn't really matter how much leverage the boss thinks he has above you economically. At the end of the day, there are laws put in place to protect you. It's sad to see that Florida is going to go the route of a few other states that are trying to remove the basic social safety nets to prevent, kids from losing their legs at the age of 6.
Oh, God, horrible. Dorothy, then Myra.
And, they're having these kids work overnight shifts, cleaning, very dangerous equipment and using very dangerous chemicals. And one of them got a lot of coverage in the New York Times about it. While we were talking about lawyers, I just want to give a shout out to another lawyer who got railroaded, and that was Lynn Stewart, who defended the blind sheik and a bunch of other. Her specialty was defending, people who were accused of crimes who didn't have money to pay for a lawyer. And she was an incredible woman. I had the pleasure of meeting her. And when they sentenced her for 2 years on a bogus charge of communicating with the blind sheik or communicating something he gave her to give to somebody. And she said, "Oh, 2 years, I can do that standing on my head." They resentenced her to 10 years and she came very close to dying. They let her on compassionate release just before she's about to die of cancer. And so horrific.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Myla?
Hi. Well, I just wanted to say that Demasio Lopez had to leave us. He had hoped to have a few more words before he had to leave. But I wanted to make sure, I don't think that he was on when Dennis was on, and I'm sharing right now some of his work. Not only has he been working on the Uranium Film Festival, but he's also a tremendous organizer working on banning uranium weapons. And he's been working on this issue since the 1990s. And
well, we'll have him back.
Yes, we'll absolutely have him back. Thank you for that. And let's see, I want to close this now. And but I'm sorry, I'm confused because I'm working
okay,
trying to see what I'm showing you. But anyway, yes, I'm so glad that he was able to come, and also that Anna Rondon was able to join us.
Yes, thank you for bringing us such great people, and we will definitely have them back. We still have 42 people with us,
right,
and approaching.
And I'm hoping that they will be able to connect with Dennis, and I wanted them to connect not only with Dennis but with Stephen Donziger. So thank you.
Excellent. All right, very good. We're approaching the 4:20 hour. If you want to get,
I'll definitely follow up on that for sure.
Oh, Dennis, you're still with us. That's great.
I'm still with you.
Absolutely.
I'm invisible, but I'm here.
Well, if you want to see anything
in this, just
Well, what a phenomenal, what a phenomenal gathering again. We're approaching the 4:20 hour. We got Tatanka. If you want to get another word in edgewise, now's the time.
It's just for future conversation, because we talk about rights of nature. I don't know if we have to start thinking about rights of cosmos. Where does nature end? What about space? What is happening above us? Steve talked about, selling rights underneath. We have to think about the rivers and the oceans. And, it would be a reasonable thing to say that that out in space, we should have conversation about commons. We're not the only people in this solar system, and who has the right to move back and forth peacefully, things like that. It's a stretch, okay, but we have to talk about it, because we're writing this progressive government in waiting with 15 cabinet positions at the Romero Institute and the Circle of 100, and 8 agency positions for each of these things. And we're talking about space and how do we legally wrap our head around this. So just to continue that conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
Can I just one final word here? I want
Dennis.
to agree with Mr. Donziger that Danny Sheen is really among the top couple of courageous attorneys on the face of the earth, along with Mr. Donziger. I want to get to Danny on that suit. I guess, what do I want to say? Oh, I don't know. I forgot.
Well, because it's 4:20 and you're stoned
There
out.
you go. Thank you. Now I know where I need to go.
Listen, you guys, this has absolutely been fantastic. Aaron, you're just a terrific piece of this puzzle. I don't know if you've met Andrea Miller and Ray McClendon directly, but we need to put that loop going and connect all these communities. This has been Indigenous Peoples Day. Our hearts are sick with the violence in the Middle East. It's horrifying what's going on there. Simultaneously with Ukraine, it's taken our eye off this other horrendous humanitarian crisis. We have to worry about our species, ladies and gentlemen. This has been a phenomenal gathering. Thank you, Steve Caruso, Mike Hirsch, Wendy Liederman, our team. Great to see you, Dorothy, so many others of the rest of you. And we'll be back again next week. Okay, and here's my shirt. I've been wearing Cocapelli. I got it on the beach at Venice. We love you all. See you next week. Thank you so much. And this couldn't have been better once again. Take care and no nukes.
Adios.
Thanks, Lagos. Si se puede.